In the early 20th century, a new breed of fictional hero took shape, the swashbuckling space explorer. Arguably, the first of these was John Carter, who debuted in a pulp magazine serial by Edgar Rice Burroughs titled Under the Moons of Mars. He was followed more than a decade later by Buck Rogers, Brick Bradford, and Flash Gordon, among others. These characters were brave and dashing and adventurous. They were tough as nails, yet noble, epic heroes in the vein of Heracles or Perseus. But instead of slaying hydras or medusas, they blasted aliens and robots and space tyrants. Over the years, numerous other characters have also been cast in this mold, whether in comics, novels, movies, or video games. In 1990, game developer Beam Software added their own hero to this roster, a daring chap by the name of Dash Galaxy. Only that's not Dash. I don't know who that guy is, but he's not who you play as in the game. This is Dash Galaxy. Yeah, the Lurpy dude in the janitor's uniform. He looks nothing like the guy on the box. This is a problem a lot of retro games have, and in this case, you can see why they fudged it. Who'd buy a game with him on the cover? But looks aren't everything. What really define a spaceman are his adventures. The premise of the game is that Dash has flown to a distant world, and there he's become imprisoned in a rocket ship maze known as the Alien Asylum. His mission? To escape! And that's it. Just to escape. Not to find whoever created the asylum and pay them back for trapping him there. Not to liberate any Martian tribes, or avert any galactic crises, or make time with any space heroines. Just to escape. I gotta say, Dash, that's not very epic. I doubt that premise would have sold many science fiction pulp novels. But this is a game, and in games the joy is often in the journey. So, let's see what this journey has to offer. In this game you have your overworld levels, your platforming stages, and an oxygen meter. The meter serves as both a health bar and a timer. Taking damage drains it fast, but it's always ticking down. When it runs out, you'll lose a life, as well as any progress on that level or stage. Run out of lives and it's game over. There aren't any continues or passwords. If you want to beat this game, it's going to have to be in one sitting. Each overworld level represents a floor of the Alien Asylum. You push boxes out of the way to access the stages, and you hop in elevators to zip up to the next floor. According to the manual, you have to complete all 4 stages on a level before you can use the elevator. Not true. To use an elevator, all you have to do is step inside it. It doesn't care how many stages you've completed. In fact, you can skip entire levels this way. Your main obstacles in the overworld are the force fields. Touching them is lethal. You gotta have a key to deactivate them, or a bomb to blow them up. If you don't have any keys or bombs, well, you'd better hope you can find some in the stages. If not, you're screwed. You'll have to start the game over from scratch. When you enter a platforming stage, the door closes off behind you. To open it again and complete the stage, you have to flip a series of switches. Reaching them involves a lot of typical platforming fare. Running, jumping, climbing, ducking, sliding, bouncing off trampolines. Each stage also has a slew of enemies and hazards, but you rarely get to kill the enemies in this game. You'll spend most of your time avoiding them. You also want to snag as many useful items as you can. Keys deactivate force fields. Bombs destroy force fields and also can be used in stages to blow up enemies. But since they're kind of rare, you're better off just saving them for the force fields. They're also dangerous. They go off 3 seconds after you place them, and if you're not a good long ways off, you'll be killed in the blast. Detonators allow you to set the bombs off at your leisure. Oxygen flasks restore a small portion of your meter. Hearts are extra lives. Orange stars will make you invincible for a short time, but you have to collect 10 of them. And finally, there are blue stars. Blue stars are for points, and in this game, points are pointless. They don't earn you extra guys or continues or anything. They're not even good for high scores because on some stages you can collect multiple extra guys, allowing you to farm points indefinitely. It's a waste of time. So, you play the platforming stages to pick up keys and bombs. You use keys and bombs to get past force fields. and level by level you work your way up through the asylum. There's just one other complication. On certain floors, the elevator disappears. Just poof, gone, as soon as you enter. On these levels, there will be a secret elevator hidden in one of the stages. These secret elevators are basically warp points. Some, like you'd expect, will send you forward several floors, but others will send you back to floors you've already beaten. And every one of them empties your inventory, so you'll lose all your bombs and keys. For this reason, you'll want to take notes on which secret elevators are which. You'll also want to keep a record of which stages contain bombs and keys, so you can quickly replenish your inventory. In fact, keeping track of these details is mandatory if you want to make it far. There are 25 floors, each with 4 stages, as well as a hidden bonus stage. Reach the elusive 25th floor, and you beat the game. The graphics are basic. Dash's animations aren't especially dynamic, but they are functional. When he runs, you can tell he's running. When he jumps, it looks like he's jumping. That's more than I can say for some games. The enemies are barely animated at all. The backgrounds are also quite plain, and the tile sets repeat every 7 levels, so there's not a lot of variety. The thing I like best about the visuals is the design of certain enemies. Look, pterodactyls! Pitting spacemen and dinosaurs against each other is always awesome. And I like the look of this guy. He reminds me of Mad Balls and some of the other Goonie toys from the 80s and 90s. But my favorite, hands down, is this abomination. What the f***? These guys run back and forth till they see Dash and then they blow themselves up. Very much like the Bob-ombs in Mario games. But those were cute. Some even had their own personalities. This thing is just horrific. It's a bomb with human legs. What kind of ungodly genetic tampering and cybernetic engineering went into creating it? It's even wearing pants. Was it born with those, or does it have a sense of modesty? What would this monstrosity say if it had a mouth? The sound in this game is also basic. The music is okay. It's kind of quirky, kind of catchy. The problem is, there isn't enough of it. You only get 1 track on the overworld levels and 2 on the platforming stages. By the time I beat the game, I was sick of them all. The sound effects are adequate. The controls are another story. They work well enough in the overworld, where all you're doing is walking around and pushing boxes, but in the platforming stages, things can get ugly. Despite his name, Dash is slow. I mean painfully slow, even when he's running. And his jumps have a horrible floaty feel to them. I know he's not on his home planet. I know the gravity in the asylum is probably different than what he's used to, but that doesn't make it any less aggravating for the player. Another annoyance is that there's no run button. To start running, you just keep walking. It kicks in after a second. This can make it difficult to pull off certain jumps with precision. Besides these quibbles, the overall control feels a bit sluggish. You get used to it after a while, but it still drags on the experience. And that brings us to the game itself. As far as difficulty goes, it's fairly well balanced. The later levels are challenging, but never quite infuriating. It is possible to land yourself in unwinnable positions, but that's typically the result of carelessness. And if you're willing to do a bit of farming, you can build up a huge reserve of extra lives. Game length-wise, there's a decent amount of content here, if you're willing to play through all of it. And some of it is entertaining. I enjoyed the box puzzles in the overworld. It's true that pushing blocks around has been done to death in games, and there's nothing remarkable about the way it's implemented here. Still, it's kind of fun. As for the platforming stages, which are the meat of the game, I have mixed feelings. Most of the gameplay elements in these stages are generic, to the point of being dull, but I do think the developers did a decent job of mixing these bland elements together in challenging ways. My favorite stages are the ones with the hover pads. When Dash is zipping around on these things, he seems a bit more like a genuine sci-fi swashbuckler. And the fact that they vanish after a short while adds a real sense of urgency to your flights, especially if you're zooming over a bottomless pit. They even bring a puzzle element to the stages. You have to work out the most efficient routes to follow so you reach all the switches on time. I just wish more of the game had incorporated interesting elements like this, instead of falling back on so many poorly implemented cliches. And I wish Dash wasn't so slow. So very, very slow. When I'm playing a really fun game, I almost hate to use warp points because then I miss out on all the cool levels in between. With this one, I'd barely been playing it a day before I started mapping out the quickest possible way to beat it. The game all but forces you to play it that way. It's like it's encouraging you to avoid as many levels as you can. And once I beat it, I didn't feel any strong desire to go back and see the stages that I'd skipped. There is fun to be had here, but you have to go prospecting for it, like panning for gold. You sift through a lot of silt and muck, and occasionally you find a few small flecks, or maybe even a tiny nugget or two, but mostly you're searching. At its very best, Dash Galaxy provides some unique challenges and interesting gameplay. At its worst, it's sluggish, cliched, and tedious. I don't hate it, but I can't honestly say I like it either. I don't regret the time I spent with it, but I doubt I'll ever play it again. Split the difference between its flaws and virtues, and you're left with a mediocre title. I'm giving it 1 bird out of 5. So who built the asylum? What's its purpose? How did Dash come to be imprisoned there in the first place? You'd expect the game to answer at least some of these questions when you beat it. It doesn't. You're just left with more questions. How does Dash escape the asylum once he reaches the 25th floor? Does he take control of the rocket and fly it off into the sunset? Or does his own ship pick him up? Or does he take off on a stolen hoverpad? Maybe when he reaches the 25th floor, he finds a horrific alien intelligence waiting for him, one with a taste for spacemen. That's the theory I'm going with, because it's dark and edgy. It also explains the lack of any sequels.